In 1997, a young American woman hiked alone toward the summit of an Indonesian volcano. She never made it back. No one saw what happened. No one was charged. Her family buried a closed casket and 1,000 unanswered questions. But 20 years later, her sister found a forgotten photograph. One detail in that image changed everything. What really happened on Mount Rinjani was never an accident. Before we begin, ask yourself, could this have happened to someone you love? The wind changed just after sunrise. At first it was gentle, like fingers brushing across the fabric of the tent. But within minutes it grew stronger, tugging at the seams and stirring the ash-gray dust that clung to everything. Emily Parker opened her eyes, still half lost in the warmth of sleep, and listened. Somewhere beyond the nylon walls, leaves rustled in sharp bursts, and a thin whistling sound rolled down the mountainside like breath through a reed. She turned onto her side and blinked toward the tent's small mesh window. Outside, mist. Heavy, slow-moving, and glowing faintly with gold. The kind of mist that held secrets, the kind that blurred the line between sky and earth. Her fingers fumbled for her camera. She didn't know why, just instinct. It was her third day on the trail up Mount Rinjani, and by now she had learned that nothing about the mountain stayed the same for long. Light bent differently here. Sound traveled, like it had to think first. And even time seemed to slip sideways. She unzipped the tent and stepped out barefoot. The ground was cool, damp. The scent of burnt wood still lingered from last night's fire, mixed with something metallic, almost like iron. In the distance, the crater lake was barely visible through the fog, but she could make out the shape of the newer volcanic cone rising from within it, jagged and dark, like a wound. She raised her camera and clicked once. Then again. She turned to photograph the tent, the trees behind it, and finally the narrow trail that curved up toward the summit, disappearing into white. There was a stillness here that didn't feel natural, not peaceful, hollow, like the mountain was listening. Her guide, Kadek, was already up. He was kneeling near the fire pit, his long fingers wrapping dried grass around kindling with rhythmic precision. His face, weathered and unreadable, turned slightly as she approached. "You wake early," he said. Emily offered a soft smile. Kadek didn't answer right away. He blew gently into the fire, then watched as thin smoke rose and curled around his face. "Mountain does that," he murmured. Emily sat beside him, arms wrapped around her knees. For a few minutes they didn't speak. Just watched the fire. Then she asked, "Do you come here often?" Kadek nodded once. "Many times, since I was a boy." "Why Rinjani? There are other mountains." "This one is alive." He said it so plainly that Emily laughed, but it didn't feel funny. Later that morning they resumed the climb. The trail narrowed quickly, hugging the edge of steep drops. Emily kept her camera strapped tight across her chest. The mist lifted in pockets, revealing brief glimpses of the world below, lush valleys, sharp cliffs, rivers threading through the forest like veins, but everything felt distant, dreamlike. At one bend in the trail they passed a large boulder with carvings in the side. Lines, curves, something like a symbol. She stopped to photograph it. Kadek didn't. He kept walking. "Wait," Emily called out. "What is this?" He stopped but didn't turn. "Old things," he said. "Better left alone." She frowned and took the photo anyway. They camped near the rim that night just before the final ascent. The summit was only a few hours away, but Kadek insisted they rest. Emily didn't argue. Her legs ached, and her lungs were tired from the thin air. The stars came early, clear, endless, and indifferent. She lay on her sleeping mat outside the tent, staring up into them. The crater lake shimmered below like a mirror held to the sky, and the wind whistled low between the stones. Kadek sat near the fire again, silent. Flames. Emily turned her camera toward him. He didn't blink. That night she dreamed of falling. not just slipping, but being pulled. She couldn't see who or what had her, only that her body moved backward toward the edge, her feet scraping for grip on loose stone, her hands outstretched. Just before she fell, she saw herself, through a lens, as if someone were photographing her. Then, darkness. She woke with a gasp, heart racing. The fire was still glowing, though Caddick was gone. She looked around quickly, then saw him, standing just beyond the edge of camp, still, facing the crater, hands at his sides, doing nothing, just staring. Morning came with a strange quiet. The birds didn't sing. The wind had stopped. Even the trees felt like they were holding their breath. Emily ate in silence. Caddick barely spoke. When they reached the narrow trail leading to the summit, he paused. "This part is dangerous," he said. "Go slow. Stay behind me." Emily nodded. She adjusted her camera strap and followed. The trail narrowed again, cutting across loose gravel and sharp stone. One wrong step, and you'd fall for hours. But Emily wasn't afraid. She was focused. She raised her camera, snapped a shot of the sunrise, then turned it toward herself. She took a selfie, just to remember the moment. Behind her, the crater lake, the rising sun. And Caddick a few paces back. He didn't smile. That photo, unknown to her, would be the last one she ever took. By afternoon, clouds rolled in thick and low. They reached a section where the trail split, one path clearly marked, another barely visible through a dense curtain of vines and ferns. Caddick turned. "We go this way," he said, pointing to the narrow path. Emily hesitated. "Isn't that the side trail?" "It's faster," he replied. "Fewer people." She looked at the main path. Empty. She looked back at him and followed. That night they made camp in a clearing surrounded by thick vegetation. The sky was completely hidden. No stars, no moon, just black. Emily sat alone by the fire, writing in her journal. "Something feels different. The air is heavier. Caddick hasn't said much. I think he's avoiding my eyes." She paused, then added, "I don't know why, but I feel like I'm being watched." She closed the notebook. The fire hissed as moisture fell from the trees, and from somewhere deeper in the forest, a sound. Not animal, not wind. A hum, low and steady, almost like chanting. Emily lay in her tent that night, fully dressed, her camera beside her. She didn't sleep, not really, just waited for morning, and hoped it would come. Emily Parker had always been the kind of girl who walked barefoot on gravel. It wasn't a statement. It wasn't rebellion. It was just her. From the time she was a child, she preferred to feel the earth beneath her feet. She liked the sting of cold tile in winter, the prickle of dry grass in summer. She liked texture, contact, things that felt real. She was the kind of girl who asked questions during thunderstorms, who stayed up late under the covers reading about places she couldn't yet point to on a map. She talked to trees. She swore she could smell snow before it fell. In a world of noise, she listened. That was what made her different. That was what made her unforgettable. She was born in 1969, the oldest daughter of Alan and Rebecca Parker, in a modest neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. Her father was a math teacher. Her mother ran a local art gallery out of their garage. They weren't wealthy, but they were warm, protective, kind. Emily was 6 when her sister Sophia was born. She had waited at the foot of the hospital bed holding a stuffed raccoon and a card that read, "You." From the moment Sophia opened her eyes, Emily believed it was her job to protect her. She became her shadow, her translator, her defender at recess, her lullaby at night. It didn't matter that they were 12 years apart. To Emily, age wasn't a wall. It was a bridge. She filled their home with stories, handmade maps on the fridge, photos taped to ceiling fans, journals tucked into the couch cushions. As a teenager, she wrote essays that teachers sent to local magazines. By 20, she was backpacking through Canada. By 23, she had started a travel blog. By 25, she was saving every penny from freelance gigs to fund her dream, a year-long journey through Southeast Asia. Not luxury travel, not resorts, real places, real people, real stories. She wasn't looking for postcards, she was looking for truth, and Emily always believed that truth lived in forgotten corners. She left in February 1997 with a used Nikon FM2, 2 journals, and a backpack full of mismatched socks and mosquito repellent. Her itinerary was loose: Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, then Indonesia. She sent postcards every week, one to her parents, one to Sophia. They weren't full of facts. They were full of color. Descriptions of the smell of mango trees in the heat, the sound of river markets before dawn. The way a grandmother in Chiang Mai had cried when Emily gave her a Polaroid of herself for the first time in her. Places are people, once, not borders. In one of the postcards to Sophia, she included a pressed flower. "This one is for your bedroom window," she wrote, "so you can see what I see when I wake up." It was pink, with edges browned by heat. Sophia taped it to her window and never moved it again. Back home, Sophia was struggling. She was 10, caught between childhood and the beginning of too much awareness. Her mother was sick more often. Her father was quieter. Her friends were changing. And the only person who made sense was gone, half a world away. But Emily always made time. She sent cassette recordings, talked to Sophia like she was an equal, told her about spirits and temples and the way silence sounded different, depending on where you stood. Silence in Bali is full of peace. But silence in the jungle, it hums, like it's hiding something. Sophia didn't fully understand, but she listened to those tapes until the ribbon wore out. Emily kept a second journal, not the one for her blog, not the one for quotes or story ideas, a private one, where she wrote like no one would ever read it. That journal is what would be found inside her backpack 3 months after her death, wrapped in a shirt, pages curled, some torn, but legible. That journal told the part of her story no one else knew. June 1997, Lombok Island, Indonesia. Emily had just arrived after 3 weeks on Java. The moment she saw Mount Rinjani, she stopped in the middle of the street. "It doesn't look like it belongs here," she told a fellow traveler. "It looks like it belongs to another world." She was drawn to it, obsessed. It wasn't in her original plan, but she rerouted everything. She booked a local guide, bought new hiking boots, asked locals about the history of the mountain. Some told her stories, others told her to stop asking. One woman in the market gave her a red scarf and said simply, "Wear this near the mountain. It will see you." Emily wrote about that in her journal. She wasn't scared. She was intrigued. "People treat this place like a god," she wrote. "But gods don't always want prayers. Sometimes they want offering." Before the climb, she mailed one last package home. It contained 3 undeveloped rolls of film, a carved wooden figurine of a woman with wings, a necklace made of volcanic stone for Sophia, and a letter. "This one feels different, Sophie. I've climbed so many places, but none like this. I can't explain it. The air feels aware. If I could bring you here, I would. But I think this place wants to be alone. If I find something worth telling, you'll be the first to know. Love you to the edge of the sky. M." It was the last letter anyone ever received from her. 2 weeks later, a call came to the Parker house. The connection was bad, crackling. The man on the line had a thick accent and spoke slowly. He said Emily had fallen, that it had rained, that the trail was slippery, that she had slipped near the summit and could not be saved, that a search party had found her bag. Her body had already been cremated, in accordance with local custom. There were no photos, no formal investigation, just condolences and a promise to send her belongings. The world stopped. Rebecca Parker collapsed in the kitchen. Alan didn't speak for 3 days. Sophia screamed until she lost her voice. And when the package arrived, it was smaller than anyone expected, One backpack, one camera, one journal, no necklace, no scarf. Sophia ran her fingers over the journal every night. She didn't understand most of it, but one phrase appeared over and over again. He watches the trail. At the time, Sophia assumed Emily meant an animal or a ranger. She didn't ask. She didn't want to know. Years passed. Sophia grew up. Her mother died in 2004, her father not long after, and Emily's backpack moved to the attic, untouched, until 2 decades later. Sophia was now 31. She lived alone in the old family house. One afternoon, while cleaning, she opened the attic chest and pulled out Emily's camera. It still had a roll of film inside, undeveloped. She stared at it for a long time, then drove it across town to the only shop that still processed 35 millimeters. 3 days later, she returned. Dennis, the shop owner, looked pale. He slid a single photo across the counter. A selfie. Emily smiling, wind in her hair, the crater behind her. And in the mist, a man standing still, far too close, watching. The photograph sat on her kitchen table for 2 days before Sophia could look at it again. Every time she passed it, her eyes were drawn to the man in the background, blurry, still, wrong. He stood at the far edge of the frame, just behind a thin curtain of mist, but even through the low resolution and slight motion blur, there was no mistaking his posture. He wasn't caught by accident. He was watching her. Sophia scanned the photo into her laptop and zoomed in. The more she looked, the worse it felt. The man wore a scarf, red and gold, loosely draped around his neck. His hair was dark, close-cropped, his face half obscured. His hands weren't visible, but his eyes were. Even in poor resolution, she could tell. They weren't casual. They were fixed, not at the mountain, not at the sky, at Emily, or at the camera. At her. She pulled out Emily's journal from the attic and flipped through the final pages again. There it was, just as she remembered. He watches the trail. And again, Kadek says it's a myth, but I hear things at night. I don't think I'm alone. And again, I asked about the symbol near the boulder. He looked away. How had they missed it? All these years, the clues were there, hiding in ink, whispered between lines. But grief makes you blind, makes you accept what's easy, a fall, an accident, a mistake. Sophia was done accepting. She drove to the photo shop again. Dennis, the owner, greeted her with a strange look. "You're back?" She nodded and showed him the scan. "Do you remember this frame?" He studied it. "Yeah." "Can you check the negative again? I think there's more there." Dennis led her into the back and pulled out the film strip from its Under the light, they leaned in together, and there it was, barely visible in the bottom right corner. A mark on the stone behind Emily, red, circular, a faint symbol. "Do you have any idea what that is?" she asked. Dennis shrugged. "Looks like paint. Could be a trail marker." But Sophia knew it wasn't. She had seen that shape before, not in real life, in Emily's journal. She flipped back a few pages and found it, half-sketched on the margin of a paragraph. "Saw this carved on a rock near the old temple?" asked Kadek. He didn't answer. Underneath, Emily had drawn a crude version of the same circle with 3 vertical lines through it. "Something about it feels wrong, like a door I'm not supposed to." That night, Sophia searched online for anything she could find about the symbol. It wasn't Buddhist, it wasn't Hindu, it wasn't tribal art, but one Reddit thread buried deep in a folklore subforum mentioned a similar image tied to pre-Islamic rituals on Lombok Island. It was called Pintu Kedua, the second door, a symbol used to mark spaces of transition between the living and the sacrificed. It sent a chill down her spine. She took the journal, the scarf, the film negatives, and her notes and laid them all out across the kitchen table. It looked like an altar, a mess of paper, grief, and something darker she didn't have a word for. In the silence, Sophia finally said it out loud. I don't think Emily fell. She booked a flight 2 days later. Lombok Island was not what she expected. Tourism had grown in the past 20 years. New hostels, newer roads, Wi-Fi and cafes. But outside the main towns, the old rhythms remained. Farmers bent low in rice fields. Dogs slept beneath wooden carts. Temples lined every dirt road like sentries. Sophia stayed in a guest house near Senaru, the same village Emily had departed from in 1997. The air smelled of rain and wood smoke. The past clung to everything. The guest house owner was a woman named Amira, soft-spoken and watchful. When Sophia told her she was researching her sister's death, Amira's face changed. Not surprise. Recognition. "You're Parker's sister." "Oh, you knew her?" "I was a girl, but yes. She stayed here one night." Amira poured tea without another word. After a long silence, she said, "She asked too many questions." The next day, Sophia walked the village alone. She brought copies of the photo with her and showed it to locals. Some looked confused, some pretended not to see. One man, an old vendor selling incense and garlic, saw the image and went pale. He didn't speak English, but he crossed himself twice, then turned his back. Later, at a small shrine just beyond the village edge, she met a man named Pak Wayan, the temple keeper. He invited her to sit beneath a banyan tree and asked why she had come. She showed him the journal, then the photo, then the symbol. Wayan stared at them for a long time. Finally he said, "There were stories, long ago. The mountain must be fed." Fed? When the harvest failed, when the rain stopped, when the land suffered. Something had to be given. People? Not just people, travelers, outsiders, chosen. Sophia's stomach turned. Wayan looked up at her. "You do not believe me." She didn't answer, but inside her chest, something was cracking. That night she dreamed of her sister. Emily stood in the mist, barefoot on black stone. She held the camera in one hand. Her red scarf floated in the wind. Behind her, a shape, tall, still, watching. Sophia woke up gasping. The next morning, Amira left a package outside Sophia's room. Inside was a cassette tape, labeled in faded ink. Emily, June 1997. Sophia borrowed an old player from the front desk. She sat cross-legged on the floor, pressed play. First came static, then Emily's voice. "I'm near the crater now. It's quiet, too quiet. I feel like I'm being followed, but Kadek says it's just nerves. He gave me a scarf. Said it was for protection, but it feels more like a mark." A long pause. Then, "I saw a symbol today carved into a stone. It looks like the one near the shrine. I asked him about it. He said, 'Don't speak of it out loud.' But then last night, I heard him, chanting. I know it was him, and I think he was talking to something. Something I couldn't see." Click. The tape ended. Sophia didn't cry there, frozen, hands trembling. She rewound the tape, played it again, paused on the word chanting. What had they done to her? She went back to the shrine. Wayan met her again. This time he was holding something. A photograph. It was yellowed, from the 1980s. It showed a group of men standing before the crater. All wore red and gold scarves. Wayan pointed to one of them, Kadek. He was younger then, but unmistakable, smiling, hands folded, eyes blank. "He wasn't a guide," Wayan said. "He was a believer." The deeper Sophia went, the quieter the village became. It was like the air itself had started to shift around her, not aggressively, but deliberately, like a whisper being pulled back into a throat. Conversations died when she entered a room. Heads turned, then turned away. She wasn't just asking too many questions anymore. She was asking the wrong ones. She began with the local authorities. The Senaru police station was a single-room building with rusted shutters and a flickering fan. The officer behind the desk looked up from a faded newspaper. "I'm here about my sister," she said. "Emily Parker. She died here in 1997. The man squinted, clearly unfamiliar. Sophia pulled out the copy of the death certificate. He took it, examined it like it was fragile, then shrugged. "This is old. That's why I'm here. I'd like to see the original report, the one filed by Kadek, her guide." The officer hesitated. He returned 5 minutes later with a single folder. Sophia opened it. It held 2 pages, one typed, one handwritten. The typed one was standard: name, date, cause of death, listed as accidental fall, signed off by a government clerk. But the second page, the handwritten one, was from Kadek, in block letters, with broken English. "Climber Parker, Emily slip near summit. I try help. She fall down. I not see body. Storm come. We not recover. I leave note. I bring back bag." No mention of the trail, no mention of the ritual, no mention of cremation. Sophia looked up. "This says he didn't see her body." The officer shrugged again. "Maybe it was taken. There was a fire. It happens." "But this form says her body was cremated." He didn't respond. "I want to speak to whoever approved the cremation. You would need to go to Mataram records office." "Can you help me do that?" The pause was long. Then, no. In the market she found a man who offered to drive her to Mataram. He didn't ask why. 4 hours of silence later, she stood in front of the regional records office, a concrete building covered in mildew and vines. Inside, the clerk wore thick glasses and a white button-up yellowed by time. "I'm looking for death files from 1997, Sophia said. "A woman named Emily Parker." The man typed slowly. Nothing. She gave the death certificate number. He typed again. Still nothing. "Sometimes files are lost," he said flatly. "There was a flood in 2006. She stared at him. "Was it flood or fire?" "Flood. Fire was police building." Sophia leaned forward. "I think someone destroyed this file on purpose." He leaned back. "I think you are tired. You should go home." She walked out, shaking. Her hands trembled as she sat on the curb. Everything was disappearing: evidence, paperwork, willingness to help. Even the language around her was starting to feel false. Back at the guest house, Amira waited with tea and a new face beside her, a woman in her 70s with dark eyes and skin like carved stone. "This is Bushri," Amira said. "She was a nurse in the village clinic in the 90s. Sophia sat down carefully. Bushri looked directly at her. "I remember your sister," she said in slow English. "She had kind voice." Sophia's heart quickened. "You met her?" "She came before the climb, had a cough. I gave her ginger tea." Sophia nodded. "Do you remember what happened after she died?" The woman hesitated, then said, "I remember what didn't happen." Sophia leaned forward. "There was no cremation." Sophia froze. "What?" "I asked the ranger that week. No ceremony. No wood brought up the mountain. No body carried down. But they said they lied." "Why?" Bushri looked down at her hands. "Some truths are old, and old truths are dangerous." Later that night, Sophia opened Emily's journal again. This time she looked not for words, but for patterns. On 3 different pages, Emily described dreams. "I'm standing at the edge. Something behind me. I don't want to look back. Kadek walks ahead of me, but he never looks back, even when I call his name. There is a fire. I think it's for me." Sophia pulled out the photo again. She opened it in editing software. She zoomed in. In the top right corner of the frame, almost too small to notice, was the corner of something wooden, angular. A structure. She hadn't seen it before. It looked like a post, part of a fence, maybe a marker. She remembered what Wayan had said. They marked the offering place. The next day she went back to the trail, this time with a local guide she hired privately, a younger man named Ilham, who didn't ask questions but watched her carefully. They followed the standard trail for hours. Then, near a split in the path, Sophia pointed left. This is where she went. Ilham hesitated. This is not the marked route. I know, he followed. The trail narrowed fast. Within 20 minutes they reached a clearing, and there, beneath a tree, stood the same wooden post from the photo. Faint paint still marked its side, at its base. Ash, still smelling faintly of smoke. Ilham crouched beside it and frowned. This is not fire pit, he said. What is it? He didn't answer, but he took 3 steps back and whispered, We should not be here. They left fast. Sophia didn't look back. She didn't need to. She had seen enough. That night she sat with her journal open, scribbling down everything she could before it slipped from her mind. That's when her phone buzzed, a message from a number she didn't recognize. Check Caddick's name through immigration. You'll find something. That was it. No signature, no follow-up. Just that. She went to an internet cafe in town, paid for time, logged into a portal meant for international travelers, tried accessing archived entries from 1997. No results for Cadek Suriana, none for Cadek S, none for Cadek at all. She tried border logs, nothing. Tried death registry, nothing. Tried arrest records, nothing. He wasn't listed as a citizen, or a resident, or a guide. He wasn't listed at all. It was he had never existed. Sophia leaned back. Everything felt off balance. The records, the burned reports, the contradictions, the post, the ash, the scarf, the eyes in the photo. And now... She opened Emily's cassette again, listened for the 5th time, paused at the word chanting, rewound, listened again, then heard something new in the background, barely audible. A second voice, low, murmuring, not English, not Indonesian. She recorded it on her phone, used an audio app to isolate the layers, ran it through a recognition software. One word appeared, over and over. Pintu. She searched it again. Pintu kakomti. Door. In old local dialect, threshold. She remembered the symbol on the stone, the same word Wyan had used, the second door. Sophia wrote it in capital letters across the top of her page. She looked at the timeline again. Emily had written about being pulled off the main trail, being watched, being asked to turn her back. She had disappeared. The guide was gone, the records were gone, the cremation never happened, and the only thing left behind was a photograph that never should have existed. Because if Caddick had taken the bag after Emily's death, he would have had to develop the film himself, which he didn't. So how had the camera gotten home? Why was the roll still inside? Unless Emily had hidden it, which meant she knew. Emily had known. Not everything. Not the full shape of what waited at the end of the trail, but enough. Enough to be afraid. Enough to hide the camera. Enough to leave clues. Sophia sat in the corner of her room at the guest house, surrounded by photos, notes, journal entries, and scraps of tape. The window was cracked open. The mountain air was cold, even though it was mid-afternoon. She had played the cassette again and again. She had listened to the voice in the background, that single repeated word, Pintu, the door, and now she knew where it led. That morning she had gone back to Wyan, the old temple keeper, and asked only one question. Where is the place the sacrifices were made? He had stared at her for a long time, then said, You don't want to see it. I do. Then go where the wind turns warm. What? There's a cave below the crater ridge. When the wind changes, the air shifts. You'll know it. You'll feel it. She convinced Ilham, her private guide, to take her as close as possible. They hiked for hours, higher than the official trail map allowed. The vegetation, the path narrowed, and just as she thought they were going in circles, the wind changed, warm, not hot, but unnatural, as if the mountain... They reached a small cliffside split, a narrow gap between 2 stones. Ilham refused to go further. You go alone, he said. I wait here. Sophia crawled through. The space opened into a hollow carved into the side of the mountain, a natural amphitheater. The stone was black and porous, the smell metallic, sulfuric, old, and there in the center of the space, surrounded by a ring of stones, lay a circle painted in red, barely visible after all this time, the same symbol from the photo, from the journal, from the rock. But now it was clearer. There was a second mark beside it, a name, painted crudely in what looked like dried mud or faded pigment. Emily. Sophia dropped to her knees. She ran her fingers along the stone. This was it. This was where it happened. She opened her bag, took out the scarf, laid it gently in the center of the ring. She sat beside it, shaking, staring at the mark. She wanted to scream. She wanted to dig. She wanted her sister back. But then she noticed something, carved into the stone directly beside her. Very faint. Initials, EP, and below that, film. Her breath caught. She searched the area around the carving, then noticed a small crevice near the base of the outer ring. She reached inside. There was something there, wrapped in cloth, small, cold. She pulled it out. An old 35mm film canister, sealed with wax, still intact. She returned to town without speaking. Elam didn't ask questions. That night, back in her room, she stared at the canister for hours, then packed a bag and booked a return flight home. Back in Portland, Sophia walked straight into McGrew's camera shop and handed the canister to Dennis. His eyes widened. "This looks older than the last one." "It is," she said. "I'll do what I can." 3 days passed. Then Dennis called. "You need to come in." The shop was empty when she arrived. Dennis handed her a small folder. Inside were contact sheets, every frame sharp, vivid, clear, and devastating. Photo 1. Emily sitting near the edge of the crater, holding the scarf in her lap. Photo 2. A fire pit, not yet lit, surrounded by stones. Photo 3. 4 men standing in a semicircle, faces painted, barefoot, one of them, Kadek. Photo 4. A bowl filled with ash and leaves. Photo 5. A close-up. Emily's shoes placed side by side, neatly. Photo 6. A shaky image. Emily's arm reaching toward the camera. Photo 7. Darkness. Only the faint outline of stone. A handprint smeared in dust. Photo 8. A final image. Emily's face tear-streaked, but calm. She's looking directly into the lens, mouth slightly open, and behind her, a figure, tall, robe-like cloth, face not visible, but arms raised, like in ceremony. Dennis whispered. "She took these just—" Sophia nodded. She couldn't speak. They went through the negatives again, frame by frame. Then Dennis paused. There was one more strip, one they hadn't seen yet. It had a marking, a number code. 513. Dennis frowned. "That's odd. That's not a frame number." He scanned it. The image appeared on screen. It was a journal page, photographed deliberately, written in Emily's handwriting. "If you're seeing this, I'm probably gone." "I don't have time to explain everything, but I saw the post. I saw the marks. I know what they're doing. Kadek says the rain hasn't come in 3 years. They think the mountain is angry, and now they think it needs someone to listen. I'm alone. They think no one will come looking. But I believe in you, Sophia. Please find me. Tell the truth. Even if they erase the rest, tell the truth anyway." Sophia collapsed into the chair. For 20 years the world had said Emily slipped, that it was an accident. But she had known. She had left evidence. She had written a goodbye. And she had counted on Sophia to find it. The next week, Sophia submitted the entire story, journal scans, photos, the film, to an investigative journalist who specialized in cold cases and international corruption. He published a long-form piece titled "The Mountain Took Her: The Death of Emily Parker and the Truth Behind a 20-Year Ritual." The story went viral, not instantly, but steadily. It was translated into 7 languages. A podcast covered it. Then a documentary team called. Then a legal group. The Indonesian government denied involvement, said it was fabricated, said the man called Kadek had no known identity. But the photos were real, the audio tapes were real, and the scarf, the one marked with blood found in a mountain crevice, was very real. So real, in fact, that when tested, it came back with DNA from 3 individuals. One of them was Emily. The other 2 were never identified. Kadek was never found. Some said he died in the mountains. Others believed he had returned to the village, taken a new name, and continued the tradition in secret. But the real story, Emily's story, had already surfaced, and could never be buried again. Back at home, Sophia stood in front of the window and held the final photo, Emily's face staring back, brave and afraid at the same time. She whispered, "You knew, and you left the door open for me." The house felt smaller when she returned, not physically, but in a way that made her want to whisper instead of speak, as if the walls knew something, as if they had waited all these years for her to open the final envelope, and now that they were holding their breath. Sophia dropped her bag by the front door. She didn't turn on the lights. She didn't check the mail. She walked to the kitchen where the envelope marked Sophia. "Open when you miss me," still sat on the windowsill. She had opened it once, weeks ago, but now she opened it again, this time not to look for answers, but to feel her sister's handwriting under her fingers. She read the message aloud. "If I disappear, check my camera, always take the last shot." She whispered it again, until her voice cracked, and she cried for the first time since everything ceased. Not the sharp sobbing of panic, but the kind of crying that only comes after truth. Heavy, hot, relentless. It came in waves. She cried for the version of Emily she thought she knew, and the one she had only now met. She cried for the years wasted in silence, for her parents, who died never knowing, and for the little girl inside her, who had waited at the door for postcards that never came. Later that night, she lit a candle in the living room. She placed the scarf on the table, the photos beside it. She sat cross-legged on the floor the same way Emily used to, and spoke to her sister, out loud. "You knew, didn't you? You knew they were going to do it, and you didn't run. You left me breadcrumbs. You trusted me to follow them." She paused, then smiled, even through tears. "You always believed I'd find you, even when I didn't believe in myself." She opened the laptop, played the cassette again. Emily's voice filled the room. Measured, a little scared. She had accepted it, not because she wanted to die, but because she refused to give them power over her memory. So she reclaimed it, with film, with words, with a final look into the lens. Sophia called the documentary team the next day. They were already editing, but she had more. A full digital archive of Emily's journals, audio files, the second roll of film, the post with the symbol photographed from 3 angles, the DNA test report, and a final video she had made herself at the site where the offering took place, her voice trembling, her hands shaking. This is where she stood, right here, and the ground still remembers. The documentary premiered 6 months later. It was called The Last Shot, The True Story of Emily Parker. It aired on a Sunday. Sophia watched it alone. When Emily's face filled the screen in that final photograph, she smiled. The next day, letters began to arrive, emails, voicemails, dozens, then hundreds, from sisters, from mothers, from daughters, from people who had lost someone and never had the chance to ask what happened. One woman wrote, "I saw my sister again through your story. I remembered her voice, and I stopped blaming myself." Another wrote, "I think Emily saved more than herself. She saved me." The website grew. Sophia renamed it The Last Shot Project. It became a memorial, then a network, then a movement. And still, every night Sophia returned to the photo. Emily looking into the camera, not defeated, but seen, finally. One evening, she stood at the Oregon coast, same cliffs they had visited as children. The wind was colder than she remembered. She pulled the scarf from her bag, worn, frayed, still faintly red. She kissed it, then let it go. Watched it fly with the wind, twisting toward the water until it vanished into the gray. Back at home, she opened Emily's journal one last time. There was one page she had never noticed before, stuck to the back cover. Blank at first glance, but faint writing revealed itself under soft light. A single line. "They may silence my voice, but they'll never silence the echo." Sophia smiled, lit the last candle, and whispered, "You echo in me." The house felt smaller when she returned. That was how it began. That was how it always began. But now, as Sophia sat alone with her thoughts, that sentence no longer felt like an opening. It felt like a closing whisper from the past, one that no longer hurt. She had spoken at 3 universities, given 12 interviews, refused 2 movie offers, and yet none of it compared to the silence she kept in her garden, where she had planted a single white flower beneath a small wooden sign that read, "For the one who never needed to scream to be heard." Sometimes strangers sent her gifts, scarves, notebooks, camera lenses, photographs of sisters, and every so often someone sent a letter that simply said, "She mattered." One night a letter came from Indonesia. It was from a woman named Ayu, no return address. Inside was a small hand-carved pendant, and a note handwritten in fractured English. "They are not all bad. Some of us remember. I was only a child. I saw her kindness. I saw him push. I say this now, so she is not alone, not even there." Sophia held the pendant in her hand for a long time, and for the first time since Emily's last photograph, she felt not just closure, but connection. Someone else had seen, someone else had carried it. She was not the only witness anymore. Years passed, the world changed. But some stories refused to fade. The Last Shot Project became a foundation. They helped search for missing hikers, funded forensic tech for families who couldn't afford it, trained young women in photojournalism, and offered something rarer than closure, context. One afternoon, a girl named Leah, barely 17, came up to Sophia at a seminar. Her voice trembled as she held out an envelope. "I'm not good with words," she said, "but I want to show you something." Inside was a picture. 2 sisters, 1 camera, 1 mountain. Sophia stared at it, stunned. "You went to Rinjani?" Leah nodded. "My sister didn't make it. Altitude sickness. She died on day 2. But she told me before we went, let's make this trip count, just like Emily did." Sophia didn't know what to say, so she hugged the girl, and that hug said everything. On the 20th anniversary of Emily's death, Sophia returned to the mountain, this time not to search, not to investigate, but to thank it. She didn't climb it. She just stood at the base, closed her eyes, and listened to the wind. Somewhere deep in the trees a bird called out. Somewhere behind the clouds the sun hesitated. And somewhere within her chest, Sophia felt Emily, not as a ghost, not as a tragedy, but as a woman who never let them rewrite her ending. When she returned to the States, she wrote a final journal entry, one she never published, never shared, only kept folded, tucked into the back of Emily's scarf. It read, "I once believed I needed the truth to bury you, but I was wrong. I needed the truth to find you, and now I carry you forward, not as a shadow, but as a compass. You weren't lost, Emily. You were waiting." Sophia placed the scarf in a memory box, locked it, and for the first time didn't need to open it again. Not because she forgot, but because she remembered enough. She stood at the shore again that evening, same cliff, same wind, but she was different. She didn't cry, she didn't whisper goodbye, she just stood still. And whispered, "Thank you for waiting." Because in the end, this wasn't a story about death, or even about justice. It was a story about echoes, about what we leave behind, about who notices, about who dares to follow the breadcrumbs, even when the trail is cold. And if you're listening to this story now, if your breath caught when she looked into the camera one last time, then she too. Emily didn't vanish.